She prepared for this meeting like a military operation. She meticulously inquired about who would be attending her father's dinner, found out who would accompany the Pope, and carefully planned her entrance. Marozia Tuscolo understood that even the most illustrious Roman marriage would not elevate her to the heights she dreamed of. So, with her mother's silent consent, who was in the loop about her plans, she set out to shape her own destiny. Marozia knew she was beautiful, but as the daughter of one of the wealthiest families in Rome, she was also ambitious, intelligent, perceptive, and completely devoid of insecurities. At just 17, she had already learned how to achieve her goals. Now, a new one had emerged, to charm the newly elected Pope Sergius III. The musicians were already playing, and guests had long been feasting at their tables, but one seat remained empty, next to Theodora, the wife of Count Tuscolo. Suddenly, the music stopped, and in the ensuing silence, the doors to the hall swung open. First, a pack of greyhounds dashed in, followed by the magnificent Morosia in a heavy brocade dress. Each time she bent or turned, the fabric seemed to slide off her shoulders, exposing her neck and chest. Some matrons whispered disapprovingly. She hadn't even worn a shift under her dress. But Morosia smiled. From the Pope's burning gaze, she sensed she had achieved her aim. However, Pope Sergius III did not enjoy Marosia's company for long. His opponents elected another pope, and in April of 1898, Sergius was forced to flee. He took refuge in Florence, while Morosia raged in her palace. Her plans were unraveling. The new ruler of the Holy See had no ties to the Tuscolo family, and the well-being of her lineage hung by a thread. Fortunately, Marosia's father understood how beneficial a compliant pope would be for them. Negotiations began with the fleeing Sergius. A detailed action plan was drawn up. The Duke of Tuscany, Count Tuscolo, and his ally Alberic of Spoleto would help the Pope return to the Eternal City. In exchange, they would gain nearly unlimited power. But here, Morosia miscalculated. Alberic of Spoleto was willing to assist her, and her father only if he could count on Morosia herself. After some hesitation, the Tuscolo family agreed to the marriage, and the plan began to take shape. Pope Christopher was thrown into prison. Count Tuscolo prepared a petition from the most prominent families of Rome, urging Sergius to return to the Holy See. Accompanied by the troops of Alberic of Spoleto and the Duke of Tuscany, the pontiff made his triumphant return to the Eternal City. His reinstallation was marked by a grand ceremony attended by a large crowd. A few days later, Pope Sergius III blessed the union of Morosia and Alberic. It didn't take long for Duke Alberic of Spoleto to realize that in the triangle of Sergius, Morosia, and himself, he was the odd one out, not the Pope. His newly wedded wife rarely stayed in their vast palace, preferring to spend her time either with the pontiff or at her parents' home. Their marriage turned out to be little more than a facade. Furious, Alberic went to confront his mother-in-law, but was met with a frosty reception. Theodora reminded her son-in-law that he had received everything he wanted through their arrangement: Marosia's hand in marriage, the title of patrician, and a respectable position. He was advised to leave things as they were, especially since the Tuscolo family had risen to such heights that it was pointless for the Duke to argue. Theodora herself held the title of keeper of the papal treasures and senator. When Morosia gave birth to a son named John in the year 1010, there was no doubt about the boy's paternity. A year later, Pope Sergius III passed away, and Marosia's family grew anxious. They quickly prepared a new candidate and successfully elevated him to the papacy. However, this reign lasted only 2 years, and once again a pope was needed. The Tuscolo family once more sought a suitable candidate. By the early 10th century, the fates of the world and all power over them lay in the hands of Morosia, her mother, and her father. The next pope was chosen almost solely by Theodora. This Giovanni di Tassignano was her lover. Morosia disapproved of the candidate and, for the first time, approached her husband with a proposal to seize power in Rome immediately. By the way, their relationship had improved somewhat after Sergius's death, Morosia even had a son with her husband. But Alberic had spent so long in the background that he had lost any real influence. Marozia proved to be more astute than her mother. The new pope, John X, refused to remain a puppet of the Tuscolo family and began to assert his independence, gradually reclaiming key sources of influence from Theodora and the others. Furthermore, he started appointing his own allies to positions in Rome, which did not sit well with the Tuscolo family. Alberic attempted to stage a rebellion against Pope John, but he was killed in the process. Count Tuscolo also passed away. Marozia hesitated for only a moment before quickly marrying the Duke of Tuscany. She needed strong allies. Her strategy paid off. Guido of Tuscany was not one to stand idly by. After preparing an army and securing the support of Roman families, the Duke launched an assault on the Lateran palace. The Pope's defenders, including his own brother, were brutally slaughtered, and John X was thrown into a dungeon. Once again, the Tuscolo family emerged victorious. Naturally, John soon died in prison. It was time to plan for the election of a new pope, and Marosia's son with Sergius III ascended to the papal throne. Never before or since had a pope's son become pope himself. John XI began to rule Rome, though in reality, it was his mother and the Duke of Tuscany pulling the strings. However, the Duke did not last long. After all, he was much older than his wife. Realizing she couldn't maintain power in Rome alone, Marozia married for the third time, this time to the brother of her first husband, King Hugo of Italy. Who would have thought that this time the perceptive Marozia would make a mistake? Her new husband was overly domineering, demanding so much authority that even the seasoned Romans were outraged. Most notably, her stepson Hugo, her son with Alberic, born during their brief reconciliation, was particularly incensed. Alberic II of Spoleto staged a coup in the year 935. He imprisoned his brother, Pope John, and his mother, Marozia Tuscolo, in a fortress. Hugo managed to escape from Rome. Once the most powerful woman in Rome, the one who easily appointed and deposed popes, died in captivity. Now, control of the Holy See belonged to her son, Alberic. He continued the same practices as his mother for another 22 years. But that is a different story altogether. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe, like, and thank you for your comments.